Chapter 4 has been out for a week or so, and with it, we got a ton of new updates from confirmations of new unseen characters, a bunch of behind the scenes on the game, huge updates on Chapter 4, and our first couple mini teasers for Chapter 5. So first off, following the release of Chapter 4, the developers on their website would drop multiple character descriptions for toys in the game in previous chapters, but also new ones like Yarnaby's, who reads, "A lion with a heart of gold and smile that touches your soul. Originally released as part of a wildlife conservation campaign in the 1970s, Yarnaby has seen regular releases in the years since. Believe us when we say Yarnaby wants nothing more than to make you his entire world." Which confirms to us Yarnaby was a lion, but also they say he was a part of some kind of wildlife conservation campaign, where most likely Playtime Co made toys based off of animals that helped raise money to save real animals, and chances are alongside Yarnaby there were likely more Playtime Co animal toys that were a part of this campaign, so that would be cool to eventually see. And speaking of unrevealed characters, we also got a description for Pianosaurus, which reads, "Originally released as part of a full set of musicians, Pianosaurus served as the harmony for the group, playing out his beautiful piano tunes through his keys/teeth. Remember what happened to the dinosaurs? Yeah, so do these guys. Don't worry though, these punks think it's all kind of a joke." Which, while they did actually tease there were other characters released with Pianosaurus in Chapter 4 itself, this officially confirms it, and specifically confirms there were other dinosaurs like Pianosaurus who played their own instruments. Again, maybe ones that could feature later in the game, especially as the devs have been vocal about how shocked they were with all the support for the character. I don't think they actively planned on bringing any of these characters to a Chapter 5 or anything, but with all of the unexpected hype around Pianosaurus, honestly, I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if him or someone in his line returned somehow. There were also descriptions for Harley Sawyer, which is just a retelling about who the doctor was, things we pretty much already know, and Doughy the Dough Man, which gave us backstory into what Doughy Dough was, things I've discussed in previous videos. But alongside these characters, if you don't remember, right before Chapter 4 released, we got these cool jingle teasers for Yarnaby and the Nightmare Critters, which barely showed up in the game. You can kind of hear the Nightmare Critters one in the safe haven and a staticky version of Yarnaby's on his cardboard cutout, but thankfully the creators of these songs actually dropped their full jingles on their YouTube channel here.
Something giving you the jitters might just be the Nightmare Critter. He'll hold you close and keep you there.
He watches over me when I sleep.
Protecting your dreams. Cozy and cuddly, your new best friend, Yarnaby.
Now, I honestly love these. I just wish they were in the game more. It really felt like a missed opportunity. Plus, another cool Easter egg is in the Doughy commercial, which was in the game, there's actually a real phone number which you can call, and when doing, it gives us this little response.
Thank you for calling Playtime Co, home of beloved children's toys like Huggy Wuggy and the newly released Doughy the Dough Man. Please remain on the line and someone will be with you momentarily. Thank you for calling Playtime Co.
So that's really weird. By the way, we are closing in on 300k already, so if you guys want more content like this, make sure to subscribe down below. But now, moving on to some dev updates, there's actually quite a bit to talk about here because one of the former Poppy Playtime developers did a Q&A recently discussing what previous plans were for Chapter 4 and even future Poppy Playtime lore, where he answered a ton of questions. For instance, Unique Geese asked if there was a push to add Catbee to the game, to which Isaac said, sadly not a ton. This is a very cool old scary design of her, referencing the Chapter 1 behind the scenes we have seen before. She, along with pretty much all side toys, was originally supposed to be a living attacking toy in Chapter 3's Playhouse, as well as appearing in the safe haven. So interestingly, all the minor characters from past chapters were supposed to be in Chapter 3's Playhouse area instead of the mini critters, but considering we only saw a couple smiling critter bigger bodies in that chapter, it makes sense they'd want the mini critters of all of the rest. It's Lightning asked about how many designs they went through for Yarnaby and Doughy, getting the reply, I don't think Yarnaby went through much iteration, but Doughy, we must have looked at 200 different ideas. I think originally he would have had several different forms he switched between, which makes sense because Doughy is like Play-Doh and could be in infinite forms, but it's cool that instead of him having 3 personalities in one body, he was going to have separate different forms, presumably for each personality. For our Bron the Dinosaur fans in the audience, somebody asked if there were other toys that didn't make it into Chapter 4, which Isaac replied saying they've tried to give Bron a scene in every chapter, but it all got cut. And we know he was cut from chapter 1 since he was in the gameplay trailer. He was presumably cut from chapter 2 for reasons we don't know. He confirmed in a later question that Bron was going to have a section in the playhouse for chapter 3 before being changed to Dog Day, and I assume he was supposed to be in chapter 4 somehow as well. He also said there was a big focus on getting Boogiebot in the chapters as well, which we kind of got in the safe haven along with a medical Boogiebot too. Regarding Huggy Wuggy's return in chapter 4, fans asked if the ending with Huggy returning was always planned from the beginning, and Isaac said that it actually was always planned and they knew he wouldn't be dead from the very start. So that's good to know that from the beginning, people theorizing Huggy would return were in fact correct. It wasn't fan service, it was always planned, along with Ollie being the prototype, which he also mentioned here. But speaking of all of this behind the scenes and cut content, now that chapter 4 is out, a few different artists have revealed their concept art for the characters in the game. More specifically, Max showed off here Yarnaby's original art and design, which basically looks identical to the final product, although his furless design is absolutely hilarious. Then in this art, we see their plans for how Yarnaby was going to work, with him in the top left searching for us while holding a catnap plush. In the top right, we see him chasing us through the vents. Then in the bottom, we see his scouting, wandering, and chase forms, most of which is what we find in the final game, outside of this scouting pose being him standing up instead of just sniffing around. But then in some doughy concept art, we got a look at his design here, which again, mostly similar to the final design, along with some art of him being frozen in a couple different forms, a walk animation concept, a seemingly scrapped concept where Doughy would transform into his evil version from the original, concept art of Doughy in his evil form, and even some art of hypothetical mechanics for his final form as well. Artist Amber, while this video was being made, also released some more Doughy behind the scenes as well, which are on screen. Furthermore, artist Roko also dropped some concept art, one here for the Doctor, which actually was originally meant to have his heart in his body form, which I actually love in the concept. It would explain why he has a body form outside of just to give you something physical to fight against in the game. In this art, we got ourselves a look at him in a cloak design significantly taller than the player, which I really like the design of. It's again a lot different from the one we got in the final game. Another cool behind the scenes shot we got was actually by Achieve, who shows off the Doughy's commercial animations in full, looking super neat, which Mob actually also revealed the behind the scenes of filming for as well. That of which actually looks really professional, almost movie-like, dare I say. In the actual final version of chapter 4, we also got some behind the scenes because YouTuber Tetrabit Gaming made a video going out of bounds throughout chapter 4, which was a super fun watch. You should definitely check that out after this one. But the main things I found cool was that in Safe Haven, there was originally supposed to be a whole new area, which was scrapped before release, and that there was actually going to be side quests in Safe Haven where we could presumably help out the critters inside to gain additional lore or maybe for achievements. This honestly explained why, despite the game taking a linear path, we still backtrack quite a bit through the prison and the caves, because chances are originally we were supposed to use the Safe Haven as a hub and travel around the prison as we please, so that's all pretty neat. And speaking of neat things, in my last video I discussed the many issues with chapter 4 while staying optimistic, as they had released a couple of patches related specifically to Yarnaby and his interesting AI. But today we got ourselves another brand new patch where this time they claim to have fixed the broken Yarnaby hiding spots more, had additional fixes to him spawn camping, fixed a bug where the bridge during the Yarnaby sequence would not always work, the elevator after Doughy's transformation / chase should now be open, fixed an issue where the Doctor minions were active after the Doctor's death, fixed TVs in Doctor's intro and Doctor's hallway, which also added a cutscene during his death sequence. They fixed an issue where going into deep crouch or using slides would cause the camera to spin, fixed an issue where the rotate item functionality stopped working after the player's death, fixed an issue where players could easily fall out of the cable car, added a kill volume to the zipline so players no longer fall below the map, and added additional UI improvements. So thankfully the game is updating further, which is nice to see, especially since when it first released, it was quite a bit controversial. And similar to back when chapter 3 first released and got a bunch of updates, hopefully we are reaching a point where the bugs are no longer a major issue. I've replayed the game since these updates and it is noticeably better. But now let's talk about our very first small chapter 5 teases, yes already. Because for one, in my last video I mentioned that the CEO Zach actually went active on Discord and told us that he already thought chapter 5 would be better than chapter 4, something you obviously expect the developers to say, but assuming it's being planned out now, that's super cool to hear. And furthermore, I actually left out a couple questions relating to chapter 5 in Isaac's Q&A from earlier that also tells us a couple minor things about the future titles. For instance, somebody asked if the story story for chapter 5 was already written by Isaac before his departure in March 2024, which he replied with saying, yes, but it remains to be seen if it gets used. Also going more in depth in other replies, saying he wrote an outline for his vision through the rest of the story. And while obviously everything he says here needs to be taken with a large grain of salt, because these are coming from somebody who doesn't work at Mob anymore, and the story could easily change from his outline, but he mentioned that the chapter 4 story was super similar to the original ideas, which gives me hope they will trust the original writing and will use it for future chapters. But perhaps the most interesting thing is somebody here asked if we will see more about the Hour of Joy and Poppy's past, a super mysterious question, garnering the response that there was supposedly definitely a lot more written about the Hour of Joy and Poppy's past. So we will see if they use/show that. And assuming chapter 5 ends up being the final Poppy chapter, we can at least expect that the original plans were to delve more into detail about what happened during these key moments of the story, possibly explaining how the Hour of Joy was organized, or maybe how the Poppy doll was created. Again, this could get changed around or be shifted in some way, but assuming this stays true, that means we are in for another super lore-filled 5th chapter.